And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 75. This is the Week 15 preview episode where the Cincinnati Bengals are headed south to Nashville to take on the Tennessee Titans. Bengals coming off a win. I can't call it a streak yet, but they're hoping to continue this, make it a 2-game win streak. They're at 5-8, and the season is hanging by a thread. It's not mathematically over yet, so either way, it's time to throw the records out the window because there's so many great storylines to talk about in this game. Titans are 3-10. They are definitely eliminated, but they're still playing for pride. There's a lot of old, familiar faces going to be going on the Tennessee Titans sidelines, especially the head coach, Brian Callahan, who was the Bengals' offensive coordinator under Zac Taylor for his first 5 seasons. He's been the head coach of the Titans and calling their offensive plays. And their offense hasn't been looking so hot with quarterback Will Levis. But Will Levis is like the complete opposite of Joe Burrow. Totally inaccurate, all kinds of turnovers, but an incredibly strong arm. So it's crazy. He's like the opposite of Joe Burrow, who has, like, as Brian Callahan said, playing like the MVP of the NFL. And I think everybody always throws that caveat of, well, if they were winning, Joe Burrow would be the MVP. Well, what is it? Why does that have to be the qualifier? Why is that the prerequisite to being the MVP is you have to be on the Chiefs, basically? Like, I mean, Joe Burrow's playing better than anybody on the Chiefs, so he should be the MVP regardless. I'm getting off the topic already. But this game is not for the Bengals' season. The season's basically already over, but Jamar Chase is still leading the league in all the statistical categories of receiving. So he wants to break all the Bengals' season records. He wants to break NFL records. He wants to be, on top of Mount Rushmore of wide receivers when all is said and done. So he's got a lot to play for. And a lot of these young guys, people like Marco Wilson and people we've never even heard of before, are playing for their spot on this team for this rest of this season, for other teams in free agency, like Joe Burrow was saying. So I think this is going to be a more interesting game than a lot of people are giving it credit for. I think a lot of people are writing this off because there's so many other big matchups all around the league with more playoff implications and teams with more wins than these two teams have. These teams only have a combined 8 wins between them. So not a lot of betting action probably going on in this game, let's say. Not a lot of stakes in Vegas. And not a lot of eyeballs probably going to be on this game, but that's okay. If you're a Bengals fan, you're going to be locked into this game. And you're not worried about all the other distractions that are going on in the media these days. They don't matter. Like whether or not T. Higgins is going to get a new agent or not. Or it doesn't matter because none of that has anything to do with this game in Tennessee. Tennessee is worried about going back to his home state in his home stadium and put on a good performance so that he can get that contract. Because last game, 2 catches, no catches in the second half. He got outplayed by Andrei Iosivas. My boy had 4 catches on 5 targets, no touchdowns for Andrei Iosivas, but people don't realize T. Higgins and Andrei Iosivas have the exact same number of touchdown catches this season, 5. So let that sink in for a moment. When everybody's talking about, we got to sign T. Higgins and pay him $25 million a year, we got Andrei Iosivas on that 6th-round contract who's got just as much production, if not more, than T. Higgins. Now, I'm not saying he's T. Higgins, but is it really worth all that money? So T. Higgins may be moving on, but he needs to prove it to some other team. And a lot of teams like the Jets and other teams are foaming at the mouth to get T. Higgins. So if the Bengals are smart, but they won't. They won't be able to trade T. Higgins, of course. They won't be able to figure that out, but plenty of time for that. Plenty of time for worried about what Joe Burrow is going to be doing in terms of security around his house, whether or not he has a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model there for some reason, unbeknownst to you and I, because it's none of your business, buddy, who Joe Burrow apparently employs, quote unquote. But she said it was her house. I don't know. Joe Burrow has his own stuff going on, but he's trying to block all that out and just focus on this game against the Tennessee Titans, doing what he can do. And this is the point in the season where there's no more bye weeks. Nobody gets any more rest. We're going into the cold. The weather is getting rough. We saw guys multiple guys now have just basically quit on their team midway through the game. Something we would have thought was inconceivable. They talked about Vontae Davis. I think he was with not with the Dolphins. I forget which team he was with, but he walked off in the middle of the game. Was it with the Colts? And, Antonio Brown taking his clothes off or taking his shirt off and running off the field. You don't often see that. We saw Deontay Johnson with the Ravens getting suspended now for this game, basically refusing to play. Then we saw a linebacker for the 49ers, Devondre Campbell. He refused to enter the game. Now, granted, it was basically like monsoon rains coming down in San Francisco on that night, and he was not playing until apparently there was some discussion about they wanted him to go in at multiple times in the game. He didn't want to go in. He's been in the NFL for 9 seasons. He may not have a 10th season after this, and people are, going very negative with all kinds of things, but you have to remember, guys, even on the 49ers, like Fred Warner talks about, he has to get pain-killing injections in the training room every week before the game just to get through the pain physically that he can so he can tolerate playing in these games. So as fans, we have to always remember, these guys, we don't know what's going on physically, mentally, whether or not they can go out there. Everybody thinks it's so easy to go out there and just, just go out there and play. And how dare this guy disrespect the game, blah, blah, blah. I hear all that kind of stuff. But you don't know, you don't know what's going on in his life where he just felt like at that moment in time, he couldn't go out there and play. And if he didn't want to play, don't go out there. You don't know. So Will Levis, he has a similar situation going on. The quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, they've got nothing to play for, but he's dealing with a serious shoulder injury where he sprained the AC joint in his non-throwing shoulder. He was missing for multiple games for the Titans. They struggled. They had Mason Rudolph play as their backup quarterback. He may or may not play in this game, depending on how Will Levis is able to play. But Will Levis, last game, he was playing. All of a sudden, he took a real hard hit from behind, and he was favoring that shoulder. They took him to the locker room at halftime. They gave him a pain-killing injection into that shoulder. He's able to come back. All of a sudden, it looked like he was going to be out. All of a sudden, Will Levis is back in the game, throwing passes. It's amazing what, modern medicine will do with these pharmaceutical injections. So the reporters were asking him, are you going to do that again this week to be able to play? And just think about that. What kind of a job are they going to ask you to basically get shot up with painkillers to go and perform your job? Not a lot, but that's what these guys are doing for our entertainment. So again, we have to keep all that in mind. I know people don't, that's not fun to think about that. Think about Jamar Chase doing the gritty. Yeah, well, think about all the other players who are behind the scenes dealing with all this kind of stuff that we have to keep in mind. But Bengals, they got a lot on the line. Tyler Boyd is going to be another familiar face on the other sideline, wide receiver for the Titans. Not having his strongest year, but he's a veteran presence in their locker room. We're also going to be seeing Chidobe Awuzie, who just got he's played in his first game of the season last week and also got an interception in that game. So there's not a lot of film to see he's been dealing with an injury. I think it was maybe a groin injury that he suffered earlier in the season that kept him out for a few games. So I take that back. I don't know if he missed earlier in the season. I'll have to take a look at it. But Chidobe, he's been out. He came back basically. But he's another former Bengal who was with them on that Super Bowl run, playing like a top cornerback in the league. And Bengals are sorely missing that presence. But we did see the emergence of Marco Wilson for the Bengals, number 42. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on him and the rest of the Bengals secondary as they try to contain Calvin Ridley. That's basically the only receiving weapon that the Titans have. But they do have Tony Pollard, number 20, the running back for the Titans. He was dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury this week. Didn't practice a whole lot, but he should be good to go. If for some reason he's not, Tyjae Spears is the other running back for the Titans. He's going to be taking over. But this matchup between these two teams, like I said, they're like basically polar opposites of each other in that the Bengals have the NFL's top passing offense, whereas the Titans have the best passing defense. So fewest yards allowed in the entire NFL, under 175 they have 175.5 passing yards per game allowed. That's top in the NFL. Bengals, as we know, often going over 300 yards passing per game. In fact, Joe Burrow has had 4 straight games over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. If he does that again in this game, that would be his 5th consecutive game over 303 touchdowns, which would tie the NFL record. Then on the other side, Titans have one of the worst offenses in the NFL. They've struggled, especially with turnovers. Early in the year, Will Levis was throwing like insane interceptions, fumbling the ball away. There was this famous slow motion video of the head coach, Brian Callahan, like screaming like, "What the F are you doing?" at Will Levis. So rocky start for Will Levis, but he's getting it back on track a little bit. The Titans, they did lose to the Jaguars last week 10-6. The Jaguars are one of the worst teams in the NFL. That was only, I think, their 3rd win this season. So 10-6 at home. That was a hard loss for the Titans, divisional opponent. So they're not looking so hot. They had a couple rough breaks there where they went for it on 4th down and didn't get it, where they could have scored more points than 6, obviously. So not a great performance, but that's the thing. The Jaguars only scored 10. So the Titans defense was playing pretty well in that game to hold the Jaguars to 10, even though they were playing against Mac Jones, not Trevor Lawrence, since he's out for the rest of the season with that concussion / I think he had shoulder surgery, Trevor Lawrence did. So, all these guys are dealing with all kinds of injuries. I saw Logan Wilson getting interviewed on Dave Lapham's podcast. He talked about how he had like loose cartilage. There were some tears that he had to have scoped out in his knee that he said he basically couldn't even bend his knee enough to get down into a stance, even throughout the bye week. So he knew he had to have the surgery. So that's the kind of thing. All these guys, we don't know what they're going through. People like Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, Jermaine Pratt, older veterans. Everybody's got some kind of bumps and bruise. We know Joe Burrow last game had that knee. He said it was maybe a bursa sack. He looked like he put a elbow sleeve on his knee. It didn't look like it was exactly a knee sleeve, but we'll see how Joe Burrow is able to run and get around, because his mobility has been one of the key factors in his game this season. All right, now we got to check in on some of the housekeeping items for this game. So this game is going to be at 1 o'clock on Fox. Check your local listings. It's going to be Kevin Kugler with the play-by-play, Daryl Moose Johnson, as the analyst. I actually like the Moose. Goose, RIP. Let's check out I forgot to mention the kickers. So, Cade York, that's part of the table dressing. It might as well be kickers. Cade York is going to be making his 2nd appearance at place kicker for the injured Evan McPherson as the Bengals kicker. And then we're going to see Nick Folk, who's actually, I think, over 40, maybe he's 41 years old, but he is at the top of the league. He's number 2 in field goal percentage this season, and he's, I think, 6 for 6 on field goal attempts over 50 yards. So no slowing down in Nick Folk's game. He was with the Patriots for a long time, and then he's been in a lot of different places, but Nick Folk continues to be a top NFL kicker, something the Bengals thought they had in McPherson, but alas, they've got Cade York, who was bounced around. Let's see if he can maintain the consistency. Got to get behind the new kicker. So, out of sight, out of mind. Evan McPherson, he's in the back seat for now. Cade York's the new kicker, and he's going to be right through the middle. I can feel it. It's going to be a game-winning kick from Cade York. Bengals keep their streak alive, the season alive. But everybody's always like, oh, can the Bengals make the playoffs? Actually, probably not. And they could be eliminated this week if all 4 of the teams with 8 wins get to 9 wins. The Bengals will automatically be eliminated from the playoffs because there's not enough games for the Bengals to even get to 9 wins at this point. So I don't think they're going to be able to do it. But I don't know. If you have any corrections that you want to send in on how the Bengals are going to make it to the playoffs this season, send it to Bengal Bites Podcast at gmail.com. What else? There was a correction I wanted to make about Joe Burrow against the Steelers. I said he only had one hand on the ball when TJ Watt stripped it out and caused the fumble. Correction on my half. Joe Burrow had two hands on the football, and TJ Watt still stripped it out and caused the fumble. So Joe Burrow, he had the hands on the ball, but it didn't make any difference. He couldn't hold on to it. Got those little hands, he can't hold on. The same thing happened with Brock Purdy in the rain. It's hard to throw in the rain when you get those little hands. Speaking of rain, when the game kicks off, it says there's going to be a 26% chance of rain, 56 degrees Fahrenheit, 12-mile-an-hour winds. So it's going to be some pretty good fall into early winter football weather, mid-December football weather down in Tennessee. So it should be pretty decent for a passing game with Joe Burrow. Tennessee's got it's a artificial turf, but it's got a little bit of a like coconuts and ground up walnut shells and stuff instead of the rubber pellets underneath. So it's a little bit more natural field. Hopefully the players are able to keep their footing on that a little bit better. Let's check out the uniform combinations that they're wearing in this game. Okay, it looks like the Bengals are going to be going with all white jerseys, white pants, and black socks to go with orange helmets. Titans are going to be going with kind of their standard, I guess you'd say, navy jersey, light blue pants, navy socks. So pretty much just, I don't know what they call it. Yeah, just navy, powdered navy. So it'll be dark against the Bengals white. That'll be a good contrast. Bengals standing out. So, I don't care who the referees are going to be calling this game. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be any of the good referees. But I think it'll be a competitive, hard-hitting, more entertaining game than a lot of people are giving this one credit for. Especially, you can't count out any game that has Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow in it. There's going to be some kind of fireworks inevitably. So you got to watch for that. And this Bengals defense is pretty terrible, so you never know what kind of 70-yard bomb touchdowns Will Levis is going to throw to Calvin Ridley in this game when the Bengals inevitably have some kind of hilarious coverage breakdown. So we'll be back to discuss that in the next episode. But until then, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.